Welcome to Thinking Green. It's nice to be back on the East Coast after a couple weeks away. As Election Day is not really right around the corner, but it's November 7th. The major parties are going to be having their nominating caucuses before the end of July. I think the Democratic one is the 25th, and the Republicans often do theirs on the same day. So we're starting to think about elections as well in the Green Party. So tonight's show, we're going to introduce two candidates who will be running for office on our line, and we'll just have an informal chat so people can get to know them. So my guests today, and thanks for coming on, are Seanice Austin, who is running for City Council, and Leon Long, who is running for mayor.
Awesome.
So yeah, I guess the first thing we can do is just start with you two, and you can talk a little bit about your background and what your life is about these days and what inspired you to run. So you want to start, Seanice?
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Ronna. Thank you for having us on your show tonight. Again, my name is Seanice Austin, and I really want to, have the New London community know who I am, know a little bit about my background, where I come from, and more importantly, why I've decided to run for City Council. So I've been a long-term resident of New London. Actually, my family has been here since the 1920s. My great uncle and my grandfather were both in the military, and I surmise that they were stationed in Groton on the subbase, and I surmise that they discovered New London, from there. And our family was originally from Florida, and then migrated to New York, and then ultimately ended in Connecticut, in New London. So we are a long-standing family in New London. I have two adult children, who are also long-standing New London residents. We've all graduated from New London High School. I went on to attend the University of Connecticut to get my undergraduate degree. And then, believe it or not, I attended OIC back in the 90s when computers were newly coming out, and I knew I had to learn some computer skills. So thankfully, OIC, who's a long-standing organization, provided those types of classes to the community. And I got my computer skills and went on to a career in higher ed. So I spent 28 years in higher ed, working for 5 years at Connecticut College, and then the bulk of my career was spent at UConn. I decided to run at this stage in life. I'm 53 now. I retired from UConn at 51, and I decided to run because now is the time. I have more time on my hands. I run my own business, so I have some flexibility with my time, and I care about what happens in our community and what we're doing as a city. I'm very interested and very excited to be running under the Green Party because I really think my values and the values of the Green Party really align. you know, I will, and I'm not shy to share that I'm a lifelong Democrat. We come from a family of Democrats. I'm a registered Democrat. But here's the thing. Members of the Green Party, Ronna, yourself included, and many others, have gotten to know me, and I have gotten to know them. And what I found is that what we want in local politics very much aligns. And the Green Party is really all about grassroots, grassroots politics, grassroots movement, and they're a party of taking action and being a part of change, long-standing change. And that really aligns with where I am personally and politically. So I'm just excited to really hear from the community, from the public. I want to know what you're looking for, what your desires are for where you would like to see the city move during this next election cycle, and how I can be a part of that. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and I wanted to know, I was a Democrat for 30 years, from when I first registered in 1974 until 2004. And then after 30 years, I decided that party's values and mine had sort of split a little. Sure. So, it's an interesting path that a lot of us came to, really feeling like the Green Party was a good place to move forward in. So our other candidate that we're going to interview today is Leon Long, whom some of you know, many of you probably know. He's actually been a guest on our show representing the New London Arts Council several times.
A whole lot.
But take it away.
Take it away. Well, thanks for having us, Ronna. Yep. My name is Leon Long, and I'm running for mayor here in New London, Connecticut. I'm running for mayor because I want to see a city government that's receptive, not just responsive. It's not all about paving streets and filling potholes. It's about listening to new ideas. It's about engaging the community in a way that ensures that the decisions you make for them are informed by them. In recent years, we've seen a real increase in our reliance on entities outside of New London to lift New London up. And I'd like to see a different approach. I think that largely what New London needs, we already have. It just needs to be unleashed. And I'd like to see a city government that is not afraid to be creative with finding ways to unleash it. I don't want a city government that daydreams about our potential. I want one that gets creative about unlocking the power we already have. I have been engaged in New London, the community of New London, for a long time. I wasn't born here, but of course New London has a long history of electing transplants. It matters less that I wasn't born here and matters a little more that I live here now. So when I first moved to New London in 2007, I immediately started working at a local bar. And in fact, I went to college for graphic design and advertising. I love marketing, I love promotion. I do it now to this day, but there was a long gap in between when I left college studying that subject and I got a job in that field. And that was because friends of mine here in New London opened a bar and they needed somebody to make their menus and help design their logo. And I was happy to do it. I started bartending for them immediately after, and I'm still bartending. But I saw right away in that role at that restaurant just how tightly knit this community was, and just how much power the local businesses have to help the community. Separate from whatever the city can do, the businesses are quite active and engaged, and I really liked that. That was at a bar called High Fives, which no longer exists. And after that, I moved over to O'Neill's Brass Rail, another bar that doesn't any longer exist. But there, if we all remember something called the Ice Bucket Challenge, where we were raising awareness around ALS, remember that time in our life, remember? So I was working at O'Neill's Brass Rail then, and I remember a regular saying a family member of theirs, who we didn't even know, you know, just one of their family members needed to raise money for medical bills. They were dealing with that ailment. And I watched it all happen. The owner of the bar at the time, he said, oh, then we'll have a fundraiser. And we hastily put something together. I made a flyer. 2 weeks later, we had a fundraiser. $1,500 we raised. $1,500. So it really showed me that, you know, when you rely on government, you know, there's the committee, there's the vote, let's send it back for another vote, there's this process. And sometimes that's necessary, but sometimes you just want to get something done. You know what I mean? And oftentimes, you can see that in the community here in New London. It's very, very common. And I liked learning that lesson that we could just do it ourselves, you know? And so I realize running for city office, it might seem like I'm a fan of that approach, but I'm trying to take what our community already does and bring that to our city government, which is be a little more nimble and receptive. Again, that's the key word. Listening to what the constituency, if you want to call them that, I prefer the word community, needs, and then acting on that. So that's a little bit about my background here in New London. I still not only bartend downtown New London, I'm bartending in that same building because there's a new bar there that's replaced O'Neill's Brass Rail, but that's sort of my legacy. You know, I'm just always in the middle of the people, and I love it. I hear things, I see things, I get to meet new people all the time. It's a great way to connect. I'm at work serving drinks, and I'm constantly having conversations like, let me get you this person's number. Pull out your phone, I want to show you this person's Instagram. You know what I mean? To make these connections, it's my favorite thing to do. You know, and we've seen a community organizer get elected the president. Why can't the co-chair of a city's arts council that is so devoted to art and culture be elected its mayor?
Okay, now I hate to bring this up. We have to talk a little bit about your name.
What's in a name? So, okay. Lots of people in the community know me as Eddie. And I have run for office before here in New London as Eddie Long. Eddie is my nickname. Let's talk about where that nickname comes from. If we remember the show The Munsters, the son's name is Eddie Munster.
Yes.
And he had the craziest widow's peak. And once upon a time, I had hair on my head. And at that time, I was 4 or 5. I had a really intense widow's peak and curly black hair. And my sister and mom nicknamed me Eddie Munster. And it stuck. It's still sticking. So that's where the nickname Eddie comes from. Leon, I'm the third, so I share a name with my dad. Proud of that name, but you know how a nickname is. It just sticks. You know, that's all there is to it. But yes, when you run for mayor, you have to run as your legal name. So you'll be hearing Leon a lot more. And this is a great chance to remind people that the website for my campaign is leon4newlondon.com, and that's leon4newlondon.com.
Well, so we all know now that Leon and Eddie are the same individual.
Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
they're the same person. Yes. Yep.
So yeah, we'll get used to it by November.
Sure.
Yes. So I wanted to note that when I was on Board of Ed a dozen years ago, at that point I used to go to a lot of the bars and music and art stuff in downtown New London because it seemed to be kind of an antidote to me to just dealing with government bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed being on the Board of Ed, but sometimes you just need to partake in that. It is not exactly a Wild West atmosphere, but but a place where people are just doing things and expressing themselves and being creative and not necessarily having to go through a lot of hoops to do it. And it just was a good reminder that the city is so much more than its government. However you might be involved in government, it's really important to remember that the city has that other dimension, and I think that other dimension is why a lot of us really love living here.
It's a beautiful building, but nobody comes to New London to see City Hall. They come to see the galleries and the venues and the theaters and the shows and the performances, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, which issues you really feel are the ones you want to focus on, at least to start this campaign, especially while we're waiting to hear from, community members what issues we might have been missing.
Right.
Yeah, so before I get into issues, I do want to share a little bit about my community involvement and engagement and my experience, right? So, as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at UConn for the School of Business, I, created a lot of programs centered on student recruitment, retention, and graduation. I worked extensively with donors to solicit grants and funding for the programs that I ran. I was also a commissioner for the New London Economic Development Office, so I do have, public, local government and service, right? And during the pandemic, I was co-chair of the Human Services Committee when we were, locked down as a country and trying to figure out, what our community needed and how we can be of service. So I stepped up along with so many other great folks in the city, to help decide where funding was going to be best utilized to serve our community. And then lastly, I was a member of the board of directors for the Neptune Park Association in the southern end of New London and worked with my neighbors there as we grappled and dealt with a lot of issues within our neighborhoods. So that's kind of my background and involvement. What issues really that I'm interested in and would like to focus on really centers on what we can do as a community to support all of the different areas of New London. We talked about the arts community, which is a big focus and an entrenched part of our city, but I also think neighborhoods, right, is a big part of who we are in terms of our identity, and really recognizing both from a historical perspective as well as current times, what certain neighborhoods bring to the enrichment that they bring to the city, and to make sure that we're not leaving those neighborhoods out of the development and the growth and the new direction that the city is going into. So that's one of my areas of focus. I'm also very much interested in our youth, right? Coming from an education background and working with young people, the youth is a big part of what I would like for us to put our energies and focus into as a city. And not just in recreational programs and such, and sports, because I think we do a great job with that. But I also would like to address inequities in terms of financial inequities, and I think the city can be a really big part of educating our young people on financial literacy, financial education, because I think ultimately that's how you build a strong community. That's how you build a thriving community, when everyone can participate economically in what our city, and much larger than that, our country has to offer. So that's a big area of focus for me. What about you, Leon?
So, yes, first of all, the youth, when we talk about what our values are as candidates and how they line up with our party, youth is at the top of the list for me, I think. The Green Party is focused on the future always, and lots of people would associate that with, maybe the environment, protecting the planet, and of course it's a lot of that. But there's going to be people living on that planet in the future. They're our kids. And so when we think about the future, it isn't just the environment. It's about, the world that the kids will inhabit from us, or inherit from us. what's the word I'm looking for?
Inherit, I think, but
Inherit
inhabit kind of fits too.
Inhabit from us. And so the youth is top of mind. Inequality, of course. Thank you for bringing that up, Seanice, because when I look at New London now, having lived here almost 20 years, I do feel that we see some of our values slipping away. In my experience, when I first moved here, we were proud of our diverse community, and there's still pride around that, but it's centered in the community. The city government is really relying on entities from outside of the city to uplift us, like I said before, and that looks like a lot of things. And I can't not address this. We have an influx of citizens coming into the city that are not from here. And on its face, that's great. We're growing our community. But I want to make sure that those who are coming into New London, because there is such a large number of them, and we intend to have them stay here, are assimilating into our family-focused, community-driven city, not our city needing to adapt to this new reality. And that is what I feel we are getting close to. When I'm driving down Bank Street and I'm all but run off the road by somebody doing almost 45 miles an hour, it feels like they're not from here. And then you realize they probably aren't. They probably just moved here. And that's a little example of what I mean by, are they aware of what type of community they're moving into? I'd like to not see us have to change our way of living to accept these new residents who, again, they're welcome here, but there needs to be a balance. It's correct when Seanice talks about the importance of focusing on family. A strong community is only as strong as the families in it, is my belief. It starts at home like anything else. And so our nonprofits that we have in the city, who I'm fortunate enough to have worked with many of them, we all do here, always keep a focus on the family. And that is what I really respect about them. And I don't want to see that go away. It's very, very important that we take care of our families. That includes nutrition, of course, education, financial stability. A lot of these things can be taught at the school level, but then when the kids leave school, do they have programs available to them as well? So it's just that little bit of balance that I want to find coming back, because the city is starting to look and feel different to me. And I like change, but I don't want it to come at the expense of good things that are already happening here in the city. And so it is really a sort of balance I'm looking for, and that certainly applies to the arts community. As our city's co-chair, or as a co-chair to our city's Arts Council, the arts community is such a prominent part of New London. I'm able to hear and see a lot of things in my role and work with a lot of people. And I have to say this, I have to say that as proud as New London is of its arts community, that community is shrinking. It's shrinking, and it has been steadily for a few years, and that really, really scares me. It upsets me, it worries me. We had a robust number of galleries at one point, and they are just that option for places to show is getting smaller and smaller. And so when I say that, what feels like a really over-the-top statement that our arts community is shrinking, I mean literally when it comes to physical space. Because when it comes to love for art in the community, it's still at an all-time high. And make no mistake about it, when it comes to the engagement of the artists, it's very high. But they're missing out on opportunities because we're losing spaces for them to show. And are they leaving and going to other cities? Yes, yes they are. In too high numbers for me to be comfortable. And so, as I said before, I feel like our values are slipping a little bit and our community looks a little different, and I welcome change, but not some of the change that I'm seeing.
You know, critics of urban renewal for decades have kind of used the slogan like development without displacement. And that has sort of a literal meaning, like don't tear down my house to build luxury condos.
Sure.
But as I was listening to you, I was thinking it was also a cultural thing, that, you know, we welcome getting more people into the city. At its peak in the early 1960s, New London had about 35,000 residents, and now we have about 27,000 residents. So we could, you know, we can accommodate more people living here, but we don't want the things that make New London great to be pushed out.
Sure.
And, you know, not just talking about old houses being replaced by new ones, but, you know, just the cultural things that make our city interesting. And I am concerned that for the artists, you know, not just being pushed out, but getting priced out, not just of living spaces, but of display spaces, of studio spaces, or recording or rehearsal spaces.
Sure.
That those spaces are getting less and less.
Yeah. And as Eddie said, it's a balance. I mean, and as we welcome the influx of new people coming in, my concern also stems from making sure that the folks that have been here, that have been foundational, that are still marginalized, are also elevated as we move forward and have change as well. So that all of our energy and focus is not just on coveting new people coming in, but how are we supporting as a city the folks that are already here? And, you know, specifically, you know, I'm looking at the Black and Hispanic community that have been here, where when we look at our number of small businesses, because family-owned and small businesses are the backbone of any community and any
Yes.
in any city. Where we are in terms of our numbers in that area. I look at home ownership, where we are as a city with that, and also looking at dispelling some of the historical wrongs that have happened due to urban renewal, due to you know, housing covenants that has happened. The city, while very diverse, is very segregated. And there are pockets in the city that are only certain people are able to live in. And that there isn't that blending of communities that I would love to see happen. So there's always that. And then there are also our specialized groups like our seniors that, you know, we don't want to forget. And we want to make sure that their unique needs are also addressed. And we want to make the city a place where people will stay, right? Not only during their building and family years, but when they retire, right? And they're older, and we have things that are for them as well. And we're, again, balancing so that everyone in the community benefits from what we're creating. I had an opportunity this past weekend during Self-Fest to spend some time talking with one of our seniors who lived at the
apartments,
the
right?
elderly apartments. I almost said Mohegan Sun Casino. What Mohegan Sun, the elderly apartments, and she just shared a lot of her concerns about, you know, what their needs are and having them addressed and not feeling heard. And so, you know, those as a candidate for city council, you know, I want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of everyone in the community, and we're listening, and we're providing those resources and opportunities for them as well.
Sure. The community knows better than anyone else what they need, and it's just so weird that we can elect somebody from our community to go sit in power, and then it seems like the second they walk into the door, they forget where they came from.
Yeah, it is tough. Well, you know, when you talk about, you know, economic development, the City and Town Development Act has to be renewed every 5 years, and it happens that 2024 is when its renewal comes up. It used to be on the ballot as a referendum, and in 2009 it was almost not renewed, because that was right after Pfizer announced that they were leaving town as soon as their tax credits ran out. And so people felt had very cynical feelings about this act, which is what allows tax credits to be granted. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to renewing it, but I think when it's renewal time, it's a good idea to have a discussion of what kind of economic development we're going to use this act to encourage. Newer buildings might get, the owners might get a 25% tax break over the next couple decades. But like whoever owns the Mohican Hotel, can they get a tax break for bringing an old building up to code if there are violations?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But
those are the things that we have to look into, right? And we have to also take an honest look at where we went wrong previously, right? And not repeat the same mistakes. We were having conversations again during Selfest. Selfest is such a great time to kind of talk with folks and really hear from them, right?
A lot happens at Sailfest.
Absolutely, and got a chance to talk with a resident that was talking about Connecticut College now having residential space downtown. And I reminded them that that's not the first time.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
It was 20 years ago we had Connecticut College with space downtown, and so when history repeats itself, it's a great time to kind of reflect back and say, what did we do wrong, and how can we do better and get it right the next time? So I think we need to do a lot of that in terms of economic development, because we have gotten some things wrong. And if we're being honest as a city and as a community, we have to admit that, right? That's how we grow, that's how you learn, and that's how you build for the future. So I hope to see more of that, because we're not perfect, right? And so we always have to admit when there's opportunity for growth and for change.
Sure, and that starts with being able to admit that we've made a mistake first. That's why some people who can't get there don't get there, because they first have to say, I messed up, I should try something different. Then they could ask for the help or the suggestions on how to improve. Again, talking about my background in marketing and promoting, I'm a big believer in messaging. It's sort of non-negotiable. Messaging is the most effective way to make your point. In advertising, it's so crucial. You have to learn how to make a point in a short amount of time, using keywords, phrases, and I want to draw this connection too. Advertising is something I've always loved, and as I've gotten to politics, there is such a connection, such a similarity. Think of a Coca-Cola ad, right? The objective for the person making that campaign, that marketing campaign, is to come up with a slogan, an image that will appeal to literally everyone. And of course that's impossible, but they try. They try to produce something that they think no one will have a problem with, maybe even everybody will like this. That's advertising. But what does a politician do? You try to craft a message that will sound appealing to everyone, and being in both of those arenas, it feels exactly the same. And it isn't about getting over on somebody or coming up with something that you can, kind of mislead them. You want a genuine message that communicates what you offer, but that sounds appealing. And so that leads me into, like you said, we can't repeat our mistakes. You have to learn from them. I like to say mistakes are okay if you make them once, In New London, we've seen time and again efforts to increase our tourism and people coming into the city. And there's no shortage of websites. If you Google New London, Connecticut, you're going to be on there for a long time. Not reading articles, trying to find the right website, trying to find the right social media platform, because it's all over the place. And it frankly drives me crazy, because we want to streamline operation when it comes to that, and that's certainly something I would look into a lot as mayor, because it's way more helpful if people can have a one-stop shop to go to. And so in my capacity on the Arts Council, working with the city's official social media department, their official social media account, and of course our newly formed cultural district. I'm really trying to hone that and narrow that. Back to repeating our mistakes. There's always a website. In New London, we like to figure out something, make a website for it, and then we kind of just walk away from it. It's very common. Most recently, it's New London, it's happening, right? We've all seen the banner. This has to be pointed out. It says newlondonisHappening.com. Is that correct? New London is it's happening. newlondonisHappening.com. So if you go to that website,
okay,
it doesn't exist.
Is anything happening?
No. No. If you go to that website, it brings you to an already existing website for New London, which of course has a different domain name. This is not something I have ever seen in 20 years of promoting and advertising. Ever. Marketing, I've never seen this. The example I give is, imagine if Target wanted to get more people to go to their website and they said, let's devise something. Let's come up with a plan. Let's come up with a website called bullseye.com and we'll promote it. And then when people go to bullseye.com, it's going to bring them right to target.com. Like, what is that? And that's what we've done. So we've repeated a mistake where we first, if we tell people there's a website to address an issue, then we can kind of just focus on something else. There has to be follow-up. This is what I was asking for 2 years ago as a city council candidate, is the follow-up, right? So you go to this website, and then it's not even a real website. So sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy because this can't be real, but this is how it works. So streamlining our approach to messaging would help the community understand what the city government has going on. If they're more informed about what the city government has going on, then maybe they'd be a little more happy to promote it, because it can't just be the city. But the city does have a big role to play in promoting what it has going on, and that is something that I think we lack in. We talked about SailFest. Everybody comes to SailFest because it's an established entity. You don't have to tell anybody it's coming. They start looking around summertime to see when the date is. We need more events like that in New London. We need more things like that in New London.
Well, yeah. Well, when you talked about the Coca-Cola analogy, though, I couldn't help but think one of the issues of getting people to, hear your message and support the product is to make sure your product is also the best it can be. So that's the second piece of it.
Right.
Is like, how can we make New London more attractive? And when bringing in tourists, if we do things that are good for the people who live here every day, if we rationalize some, fix some of the sidewalks, make uniformly good lighting, engineer the streets so that people can't go 45 miles per hour on a street where there are a lot of pedestrians crossing. If we do things like that that help people who live here, they actually help the tourists too.
Yeah, it's us first. That's okay to think of that, and by extension, the people that come in after will benefit from those things as well, of course.
And it seems like sometimes we're backwards. We're thinking of the tourists first, and that may or may not benefit the people who live here.
Yeah, so I have to. So
sure.
When we talk about that, though, the things that we should be thinking about to lift us up, we already have them. We should be expanding on them. And sometimes I mean literally. Like, who doesn't think in New London that we should have businesses open during the day? If you go to something like a Westerly, 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, there's no closed restaurants. You go to the downtown and you eat something. It's that easy. And there is something in our city that we can't get past that makes it so we've just accepted that we're slow during the day. And I reject that, because the buses, trains, and ferries bring thousands of people into our city a week. Those are potential customers for our galleries, for our restaurants, for all of our businesses. The train station is located directly adjacent to the main downtown strip, and there is no synergy. And there is economic progress to be made by strengthening the synergy between our downtown area and the people who get off, or that train station, so that people who get off the bus, train, and ferry can come and populate our businesses.
And that's actually more important going forward now that the Coast Guard Museum is being built, because where it's being built, there can be synergy between the museum and the downtown, or we might blow it and not have synergy between the museum and the downtown.
I can't hold back. I'm frankly waiting for us to blow it. We've done this a million times. There's the opportunity.
Yeah.
How can we squander it?
Part of the focus needs to be on, and we talk about this a lot on our team meetings, right? For my team, we talk about how do you get your team to buy in, fall in love all over again, right? And I think that's something that cities can take. It's not about bringing in new people to fall in love with the city, but how do you get the people that are already here
That's a great point.
to fall in love with the city all over again,
That's a great
right?
point.
And that's kind of, to your point of we have everything it takes, right? New London is a great city. We have all of the key elements. It has so many great parts to it, between the beaches and the architecture and the neighborhoods I talked about in our parks. We have some of the best parks in Connecticut, I think. And we have so many we have 3 colleges that are right here within our 6 square miles. We have so many great things going for us. And I think if we can focus on getting our city to fall in love again with the city, because there are so many times when that happens, and it's such a beautiful thing to witness. Sailfest is one of those times where local people love the city, right, and enjoy it. And then there's other times throughout the year that we see that when our sports teams do really well, right, and they win, state championships. You can see and you can feel that New London pride, that energy coming from the city. That should be the type of thing that we covet, that we try to generate throughout the year, whether it be different events, different venues or activities, or just in how we interact as a city, what we do as a city. That's how you get people to re-engage, right? And then that brings in outside people, because people want to be where things are happening at. That people want, and people are attracted to that energy. And I think, as you said, Ronna, that will be what will bring people into the city. It's not tourism would be the focus. It's making it a great place to live and making the people that are already here wanting to be here what will attract tourists and then others to also want to live here.
That is the conundrum of tourism, is that you feel like the mission is to come up with some new thing that will get people to come here, but really the task is to find a way to celebrate what's already here and make that look appealing. And it's easy to get tempted to come up with something new, and that's why we have a gigantic banner with a fake website on it, because we got so tempted to do this big flashy thing, but it's not even a Band-Aid. I mean, I don't know what I'd describe it as. But yes, everything you just said, I agree with. And with the idea of, it gives me goosebumps. I love that concept. How can we make the people already here fall in love with the city again? Because it's shiny and new if you just moved in. They love it. I serve them drinks all the time. I meet them all the time. They love it here. Oh, this is great. And it is very, very exciting to hear somebody that's just come to the city talk about stuff that seems mundane to us that they just love. Oh, you guys do this. That's very exciting. Let's give more stuff like that to talk about. And I think to answer Seanice's question about how can we make the city fall in love with itself again, I think it is to really show them that we have done something that we thought we couldn't do. I think that's a good way to make the city fall in love. And 2 examples of that would be to figure out a way to expand our businesses' operating hours during the day so that we can have, frankly, a more normal downtown area, because it's very awkward. These people get off the bus, train, and ferry, and again, my capacity as a bartender, they're asking me, where can I go to eat? Where can I go to shop? Where can I go to buy a T-shirt that says New London on it? And depending on the day,
you can.
Depending on the day of the week, the answer is almost nowhere. When it comes to where can you buy a shirt that says New London on it, absolutely, you can go to the Annex and do that. And they sold a lot of them this weekend at Sailfest. that's something that I do. I mean, it's a plug for a store in New London, but I have to say, I think that that entity is capable of a lot. If we're familiar with how Mystic has expanded on finding another way to expand on its downtown area with a information center. Any time that you go to Mystic, that information center is bustling. It's bustling. There's fun stuff in there. Everything says Mystic on it. There's t-shirts everywhere. We have that capacity. We do. But it's successful in Mystic because the municipality and their chamber really, really works with that space to lift it up. And I think that New London needs to do something like that. There just needs to be more synergy between the train station and downtown, and a more concrete effort to enhance tourism, which doesn't mean banners, it doesn't mean websites, it means figuring out what we have and really maximizing it.
It really does make me wonder whether programs like in the City and Town Development Act can be used to offer some kinds of enticements to businesses so they can hire the necessary people to be open more hours, because
Right.
it's often just largely a staffing issue, or help with the utility bills, which I heard over the last year have been really burdensome to downtown restaurants. It's a tough life anyway to run a small business. It can be very precarious for the owner, but it seems like we depend on that. And any investment counselor, much more about this than I do, will tell you don't just invest in one thing, even if it's the most promising investment ever.
Diversification.
You have to
have diversity in investing, and that same concept is true for running a
cities.
city. Exactly right. Because you set yourself up for failure in case that one thing goes down. What happens then?
Yeah.
So,
and as time goes by, everything's going to have its cycle.
absolutely.
So one of the ways we can diversify our economy in New London is to support all the small things that are going on, and not just think about the few big employers, EB, of course, the hospital, the colleges, but we need more than that to feel like we have an economy that can sustain us through different types of times.
It is that simple, isn't it? I mean, to take the little things we have and make them big is always going to be an approach that I prefer to finding a thing that's already big and seeing if that works. Because if that's your approach, it will be at the expense of the smaller things unless you strike a balance. And that's what our city government isn't doing. They're focusing on the big, and all of the little things are getting left behind. And that's not just my opinion. It's what I hear all the time.
I'm sure. I had one more question for Seanice in particular, I think,
Yes.
because one thing that's always kind of impressed me, being a Facebook friend of yours, is your focus on financial literacy, but also that people can make the best life they can for themselves, but also not forgetting that there are groups that are owed. Now, on a municipal level, we know that Black home ownership really suffered through urban renewal of the 60s and 70s, and there were lots of land covenants and deed restrictions that prevented ownership. What can the city do? I know there are things that need to be done on the federal level or the state level, but what can we do on a municipal level to help level the playing field a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the details with the history. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about this topic, but we know that urban renewal and all of the policies, both written and unspoken, right, have impact today. I think it's important for communities to go back and look at the records. We have the records. It wasn't that long ago. And really, before we move forward as a community, that we need to address those historical wrongs and make them right. When we look at East New London, for example, now that the high-rise apartment buildings have come down, the city is planning on, doing new businesses in that space. But if we look back, that was a thriving community with Black and immigrant community in East New London that had homes and businesses that were there. And when they were pushed out due to eminent domain, we know that they did not get what was due to them. And many of those families were not able to repurchase homes again in the city. And those that were able to were directed to only certain neighborhoods. So certain neighborhoods, when we think about, Truman Street, Belden Street, Blackhall Street, those were the neighborhoods that Blacks were allowed to purchase in. And we have to look at how we can rectify those historical wrongs. And as a city, those are things that I would want the city of New London to look at. The big picture, though, is not on what happens internally within our city, but the movement at the federal level, because that's where you make real change. So as the city, municipalities can create that historical data that can be shared at both the state level, so to our state legislatures, and then on to the federal legislatures, and really making champion a federal effort toward reparative justice in this country. And I think that will not only benefit New London, but it will benefit the country as a whole. So that's definitely conversations that I think we need to have as a city, how we can champion what's going on across the country in the area of reparative justice.
Now, one other thing I've noted in New London is we get a whole lot of proclamations and ceremonies.
Pomp and circumstance.
Yeah, and sometimes they kind of, and they're usually good statements, but very often they're not even really accompanied by like baby steps of actions. So are there any, as a potential mayor and city councilor, how do we start taking it one step further, or more than one step further, but at this point I'd be happy for a first step?
Well, my favorite proclamation that we've never followed up on is declaring racism a public health crisis in New London, which we did ages ago.
Yeah, it was at least 3 years.
If you remember all of the articles, every one of them that was interviewed said, really looking forward to the next steps. Well, guess what? I am too, because I haven't seen them, because they're non-existent. There have been no next steps, exactly none. It's embarrassing, it's hurtful, and of course it needs to change. And to go back, I love a good callback. Being able to admit you made a mistake. The ego is something else. And if you're a city government that made such a proclamation and even promised next steps and never provided those next steps, I mean, that's a huge mistake. And it's a slap in the face of the people that you said, we acknowledge that there's something dangerous out there that you need to deal with. How about this analogy? Public health crisis? Forget that it was Trump, forget about Biden. If the President of the United States, whoever he or she may be, says that there's a public health crisis and then never does anything to follow up on, that's unconscionable. But in New London, we have that ability to declare something a public health crisis, to shout at the top of our lungs that there's danger, and then do nothing about it. It should be viewed that way. It is offensive. It's certainly something that needs to be readdressed. And we can start small and get creative about big steps. But I work at a local radio station. I, until recently, was the only person of color in our day-to-day operations. I watch a video on diversity and equity and inclusion every year. And I'm not saying because I'm a person of color I don't need to. I'm just painting a picture here. I don't think our police department has ever watched one of those. I don't think a member of our city government or any elected official has ever watched one of those. Start with that. And I really mean that because we have seen documented in the newspaper and from the victims of them, who some of them were elected officials, we've seen what can happen at the police department. Our police department isn't unique. It's a boys' club. And so we've seen what happens there. And I hold out hope that maybe if somebody watched one of those videos, they'd feel bad about a remark or leaving a stupid note. That's my hope. And that's why I said we can start small and get creative about ways to get big. But that's one of the biggest declarations we've ever made that we didn't follow up on.
Now we have 3 minutes left.
Okay, 3 minutes left. So just to add on to what Eddie just shared, I think what's required requires us to do something that is not going to please everyone.
Sure.
And we have to have a willingness to go beyond making everyone happy, but to doing what is right.
Growth can hurt.
Right? And I think that is the reluctance, because we'll never be able to do something that addresses everyone, that pleases everyone. And so when we think about racism as a public health crisis, that's going to first and foremost require us to address the historical wrongs, right? We have to start there. I think watching a video is great, but I think obviously that's just performative. And when we
Sure.
put out those types of things, people will latch onto it and say, oh, I've done that, and that becomes a check mark. Right. So I think that it just requires us to do more, think bigger,
sure.
right, and make people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That's what's required. And what that entails, it's going to take all of us to come together and really
Sure.
address that.
I would have no problem making people feel uncomfortable if it meant that the people that feel intimidated no longer feel intimidated. Discomfort over intimidation all day long. Yeah.
So I want to invite everyone who's watching, if you want to meet Seanice and Leon in person, we are having a nominating meeting and social gathering at Bates Woods this Saturday, July 15th, 1 p.m. There will be snacks, there will be a lot of conversation, and everyone's invited. It's a public meeting, it's an official meeting, but it's also a public meeting and a good opportunity to meet the candidates. We will have more programs about some of the ins and outs of this election season, including the 4th polling station that New London will be getting, and a lot of details moving forward. But thank you, Seanice, thank you, Leon, for coming on this first time to introduce yourselves.
Absolutely.
And to let the New London viewing public get to know where we're starting.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us. Thank
Yeah.
you for allowing us to share a little bit about who we are. And I look forward to seeing so many of you next
See you
Saturday.
soon.
Yes, so we'll be back next week, and thank you to both of you.
When the rain don't fall, that's when you know you're gonna go dry. When the rain don't fall, that's when you know you're gonna go dry. And it won't do no good to be crying out loud, babe, or cursing the sky.